The Senna block. Ayrton Senna crosses the track at 180 miles per hour, forcing Nigel Mansell to slam his brakes so hard the Williams nearly goes airborne. This is Hungary, 1989, and Senna has just pulled off the most audacious defensive move in Formula One history. He waits until the absolute last possible microsecond, then throws his McLaren directly into Mansell's racing line like he's playing chicken with death itself. The crowd goes absolutely mental, because nobody has ever seen anything this aggressive, this calculated, this borderline insane. Mansell throws his hands up in the cockpit, completely losing his mind, but there's nothing he can do about it. Senna holds the position and wins the race. Today, this exact same move would earn you a 5-second penalty minimum, possibly a race ban, because the FIA decided that deliberately impeding another driver like this crosses the line from racing into something more dangerous. Schumacher's Suzuka squeeze. Michael Schumacher is about to lose the 1990 World Championship when he does something that makes grown men gasp in horror. He's wheel-to-wheel with Alain Prost at the first corner of Suzuka, traveling at nearly 200 miles per hour, when he suddenly jerks his Ferrari directly into Prost's McLaren. Both cars explode into the gravel trap in a shower of carbon fiber and dreams, and Schumacher becomes world champion because of basic mathematics. Prost climbs out of his destroyed car, looking like someone just stole his wallet, his wedding ring, and his favorite dog, all at the same time. The move was so blatantly intentional that Schumacher later admitted he planned the whole thing, calling it a racing incident with the straightest face in motorsport history. Modern Formula One would have stripped him of every point he ever earned, and probably banned him from the paddock for the rest of his natural life. The Fangio swerve, Juan Manuel Fangio, is coming down the main straight at Monza in 1957, when he starts weaving across the track like a drunken sailor trying to find his ship. He's not losing control or having mechanical problems, though. He's deliberately trying to break the slipstream of the cars behind him, moving left and right and left again in these massive, sweeping motions that cover almost the entire width of the circuit. The Ferrari behind him is getting closer and closer, but every time it tries to pull alongside, Fangio throws his Maserati into its path, forcing the other driver to lift off the throttle and fall back into his dirty air. This goes on for lap after lap, this beautiful, deadly dance at speeds that would make modern safety experts faint. Fangio wins the race through pure tactical brilliance, but today's regulations specifically prohibit more than one defensive move per straight, making his masterclass completely illegal and punishable by time penalties that would ruin any championship hopes. The moving chicane. Nelson Piquet is driving so slowly through the Monaco chicane in 1982 that tourists could probably walk faster, but he's doing it on purpose, and it's absolutely genius. He knows that Riccardo Patrese is right behind him, desperate to overtake. But Piquet also knows that the track is so narrow here that passing is basically impossible unless he makes a massive mistake. So he doesn't make mistakes, he just drives at about half the speed he could manage, taking the racing line through every corner and forcing Patrese to crawl behind him like they're both stuck in weekend traffic. The crowd is booing, the commentators are calling it unsporting, and Patrese is probably contemplating murder, but Piquet doesn't care because he's protecting his position using the oldest trick in racing. Modern Formula One has minimum sector times and regulations about deliberately impeding other drivers, making this kind of strategic crawling completely illegal and subject to penalties that would destroy your race instantly. The kamikaze start René Arnoux launches his Ferrari off the grid at the 1982 French Grand Prix like he's been fired from a cannon, but instead of staying in his lane, he cuts directly across 3 other cars at the first corner in a move so aggressive it defies basic physics and common sense. He's starting from 4th position, but by the time they reach the apex, he's somehow in 1st place because everyone else had to choose between giving him room or dying in a spectacular fireball. The other drivers are screaming over the radio about how insane this move was, but Arnoux just keeps driving like nothing happened, holding onto the lead for the first 10 laps until his engine finally gives up and starts smoking like a barbecue. Today, this kind of multi-car blocking maneuver would result in immediate penalties, grid position losses, and probably a very serious conversation with race stewards about whether Arnoux should be allowed to continue racing at all. The Berger brake test. Gerhard Berger is coming down the main straight at Hockenheim when he does something that makes other drivers question his sanity and their own life choices. He's being followed closely by 3 other cars in a high-speed train, everyone trying to use each other's slipstream, when Berger suddenly hits his brakes for absolutely no reason at all. Not gradually, not subtly, but a proper full-pressure brake application that sends his Ferrari lurching forward against its safety belts, while the cars behind him him scatter like frightened birds. Two of them nearly collide with each other, trying to avoid rear-ending him, and the third one goes off into the grass at 180 miles per hour, somehow managing to keep it pointing forward through pure luck and excellent reflexes. Berger later claimed he thought he saw something on the track, but everyone knew he was just trying to break up the slipstream battle because his car wasn't quite fast enough to pull away naturally. Modern regulations specifically prohibit sudden braking or deceleration except in genuine emergencies. The Prost cut-off, Alain Prost, is leading the 1986 Australian Grand Prix when he pulls off a move so subtle and devastating that most people don't even notice it until they watch the replay in slow motion. He's coming out of a fast corner with Keke Rosberg right behind him, and as they approach the next turn, Prost gradually starts moving toward the inside line, like he's just following the normal racing trajectory. But he keeps moving, inch by inch, until Rosberg suddenly realizes he's been squeezed completely out of the racing line and pushed toward the outside wall at 160 miles per hour. Rosberg has to lift off the throttle and drop back, losing several positions in the process, while Prost continues on like nothing happened. The move was so smooth and calculated that it looked almost accidental, but Prost later admitted it was completely intentional, calling it strategic positioning. Today's regulations about leaving racing room for other drivers would make this kind of gradual squeeze completely illegal, resulting in time penalties and official warnings. The Hunt block. James Hunt is defending his position at the 1976 Japanese Grand Prix when he does something that makes everyone watching realize why they call him one of the most aggressive drivers in Formula One history. Mario Andretti is trying to pass him on the outside of a fast corner, and instead of taking the normal racing line, Hunt suddenly swings his McLaren directly into Andretti's path, forcing the Ferrari to take evasive action that sends it sliding sideways across the wet track surface. Andretti somehow manages to keep control of his car, but he's lost so much momentum that he drops back 3 positions and starts swearing over the radio in a mixture of English and Italian that would make sailors blush. Hunt holds on to his position and eventually finishes the race, but the move was so blatantly dangerous that modern stewards would have given him a drive-through penalty immediately, possibly followed by a racing ban for deliberately endangering another driver. The fact that he did it in wet conditions, when cars are already difficult to control, makes it even more shocking by today's standards. The Mansell missile. Nigel Mansell comes charging up behind backmarker cars at Silverstone in 1987 like he's commanding a tank division in World War III, and instead of waiting for a safe opportunity to pass, he just starts forcing his way through wherever he sees the tiniest gap. He's lapping these slower cars, so technically he has the right of way, but the way he exercises that right would make modern safety officials have nervous breakdowns. Mansell throws his Williams into spaces that are barely wider than his car, forcing other drivers to take emergency evasive action or risk being collected in massive accidents. One backmarker goes off into the grass, another one nearly spins, trying to get out of his way, and a third one gets so startled that he misses his braking point and runs wide at the next corner. Mansell doesn't seem to care about any of this chaos he's creating. He just keeps charging forward like the track belongs to him personally. Modern blue flag regulations require much more patience from leading drivers and would penalize this kind of aggressive lapping behavior with time penalties and official warnings. The Lauda weave. Niki Lauda is coming down the main straight at Monza in 1975 when he starts performing a defensive weaving maneuver that looks like he's trying to write his name across the track surface using tire marks. He's got 3 cars lined up behind him, all trying to use his slipstream for an overtaking opportunity, but Lauda is determined to break up their carefully planned attack by moving unpredictably across the racing line. Left, right, left again, then a sudden dart to the right that nearly sends one of his pursuers into the barriers, followed by another move left that forces someone else to check their mirrors and consider their life choices. This goes on for several laps, with Lauda creating a rolling roadblock that makes it impossible for anyone to get a clean run on him, even though their cars might actually be faster in a straight line. The Austrian's tactical brilliance is undeniable, but modern regulations limiting defensive moves to 1 per straight would make his weaving masterclass completely illegal and subject to immediate penalties. The Piquet Punt Nelson Piquet is running second at the 1986 Hungarian Grand Prix, when he decides that finishing behind Ayrton Senna is simply not acceptable to his personal sense of dignity and championship ambitions. Coming into a tight corner, instead of trying a normal overtaking maneuver, Piquet just rams the back of Senna's McLaren with his Williams, sending both cars sliding sideways in a shower of sparks and rubber smoke. Senna somehow manages to keep his car pointing forward and maintain his position, but Piquet's move was so blatantly intentional that even the notoriously lenient 1980s stewards considered giving him a penalty. He later claimed it was a racing accident, but the telemetry data clearly showed he never even attempted to brake properly before making contact. Modern Formula One has zero tolerance for deliberate contact between cars, and this kind of punt move would result in immediate disqualification, heavy fines, and probably a multi-race suspension for deliberately endangering another driver. The fact that both cars somehow avoided a major accident was pure luck, not skillful driving. The Rosberg chop Keke Rosberg is leading a train of 5 cars through the high-speed sections of Spa-Francorchamps in 1984, when he pulls off a defensive move so sudden and violent that it nearly causes the biggest multi-car accident in Formula One history. He's being closely followed by cars traveling at over 200 miles per hour, all lined up in perfect formation to take advantage of each other's slipstream, when Rosberg suddenly throws his Williams directly across the track without any warning or gradual movement. The car immediately behind him has to take emergency evasive action, which triggers a chain reaction of near misses and desperate steering corrections that sends the entire group sliding sideways across multiple racing lines. Somehow, miraculously, nobody actually hits anybody else, but it's pure luck rather than skill that prevents a catastrophic accident. Rosberg's move was effective at breaking up the slipstream train, but it was also incredibly dangerous and completely unpredictable. Modern safety regulations specifically prohibit this kind of sudden direction change, especially at high speeds, and would result in severe penalties, including possible race exclusion. The Villeneuve squeeze. Gilles Villeneuve is defending his position at the 1981 Monaco Grand Prix when he demonstrates exactly why he's considered one of the most fearless and uncompromising drivers in Formula One history. He's got 3 cars lined up behind him on the narrow Monaco streets, all looking for any opportunity to overtake, but Villeneuve makes it absolutely clear that he's not going to make their job easy or safe. Coming out of corners, instead of leaving any racing room on the outside, he positions his Ferrari so close to the barriers that paint from the guardrails starts scraping off on his side pods. When cars try to pass on the inside, he moves over so aggressively that they're forced to choose between backing off or risking a collision that would probably send both cars into the harbour. One driver gets so frustrated that he starts gesticulating in his cockpit, clearly shouting words that would never be broadcast on television, but Villeneuve just keeps driving like he owns every inch of the track surface. Modern regulations about leaving adequate racing room would make his defensive tactics completely illegal and subject to immediate time penalties. The Patrese block, Riccardo Patrese, is coming down the main straight at Monza in 1983, when he executes a blocking maneuver so perfectly timed and brutally effective that it becomes a masterclass in defensive driving tactics. He's being chased by 3 cars that are clearly faster than his Brabham in a straight line, but Patrese knows that if he can just disrupt their slipstream strategy, he can hold his position through pure tactical brilliance. As the cars behind him start to move out for overtaking attempts, Patrese begins a series of defensive moves that look almost choreographed in their precision. Left to cover the inside line, then immediately back right to block the outside, then left again when someone tries to switch back, all while maintaining exactly the right speed to keep them in his dirty air. The Italian's timing is so perfect that he manages to defend his position for over 10 laps against obviously superior machinery, but modern regulations limiting drivers to 1 defensive move per straight would make his tactical masterpiece completely illegal and punishable by time penalties that would destroy any chance of points. The Andretti, cut-off Mario Andretti, is leading the 1978 Dutch Grand Prix when he pulls off a move that demonstrates exactly why American drivers have such a reputation for aggressive racing tactics. He's got Ronnie Peterson right behind him in an identical Lotus, which should make for interesting team dynamics, but Andretti makes it clear that friendship and team orders don't matter when there's a race victory at stake. Coming into a fast corner, instead of taking the normal racing line that would leave room for Peterson to attempt an inside pass, Andretti suddenly cuts across the track and forces his teammate to choose between lifting off the throttle or risking a massive accident that would take out both Lotus cars. Peterson, being Swedish and therefore naturally diplomatic, chooses to back off, and wait for a better opportunity. But his radio transmissions make it clear that he's not particularly happy about his teammates' aggressive defensive tactics. Andretti goes on to win the race, but his cut-off move would be completely illegal under modern racing regulations that require drivers to leave adequate space for cars that have a significant overlap.